the Wollega tour and the politics of manufactured support. In recent days, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed toured Wollega under the banner of development and project inaugurations. But beneath the ceremony lies a deeper political question. Was this visit about progress, or about preparing public opinion for another confrontation in northern Ethiopia? In this episode of Digital Oromia, we examine the politics behind the Wollega tour, the messaging of unity, the framing of enemies, the visible security posture, and the broader attempt to present Oromo public opinion as unified behind a potential new war. We analyze why this narrative matters, how it risks transforming state conflict into ethnic conflict, and why separating Oromo identity from state war agendas is essential for preventing another national crisis. Support. Abiy Ahmed's recent tour of Wollega, presented as a sequence of project inaugurations, appeared less focused on demonstrating development gains and more oriented toward political staging under war risk conditions. The visit functioned as a message about governability and mobilization. It suggested that a new escalation is being narratively prepared, while also attempting to discipline how the public should interpret that escalation. A central feature of the tour was its ability to communicate control. Through speeches and interviews, Abiy worked to reaffirm two claims at once. The first was that his political base in Oromia remains manageable and firmly within the center's reach. The second was that Oromo public opinion can be presented as unified behind his war agenda. His warning that enemies are trying to snatch the opportunities of the Oromo and set us back a century, combined with calls for reconciliation and unity among Oromo political actors, served a dual function. It sought to rally supporters through a threat narrative while also narrowing the space for dissent by framing internal disagreement as avoidable. At a moment of national urgency, the unusually tight security posture surrounding the Wollega visit strengthened this reading because it revealed something the ceremony tried to conceal. Wollega has lived through more than 7 years of instability, armed confrontation, and continuing insecurity, and the state knows it cannot assume public space there in the same way it does elsewhere. The dense and layered security, with close protection and wider perimeter controls, was more visible than in many of his other public visits in recent years. Security arrangements do vary by venue and threat perception, but this contrast is politically meaningful. It suggests not confidence but caution, and it reflects an expectation of contestation in Wollega that the official development framing cannot admit. This messaging was not only directed toward Oromo constituencies, it also carried an outward signal. By presenting Oromo support as consolidated during a high-profile tour, the narrative implicitly communicates to other groups, particularly Amharas, Tigrayans, and Eritreans, that the Oromo people as a collective are aligned with, and therefore implicated in, his political and military ambitions. This is a dangerous simplification. It shifts political responsibility from decision-makers to the entire people, and it encourages future retaliation narratives by converting state conflict into communal conflict. Neutralize the Northern War narrative. To understand why this narrative is dangerous, it is necessary to name the political work it is doing. A key move in Abiy's messaging is the attempt to present Oromo public opinion as unified behind a coming confrontation, and to define that confrontation as a defense of Oromo opportunity against unnamed enemies. The claim that enemies are trying to snatch the opportunities of the Oromo and set us back a century is designed to convert a political agenda into a collective ethnic duty. It translates state decisions into Oromo destiny. It also reframes disagreement as betrayal, because anyone who questions the war logic can be portrayed as enabling the supposed enemy project. This narrative must be neutralized, because the Oromo people have carried heavy burdens under this regime inside. Oromia itself and this reality cannot be separated from any honest discussion about war and mobilization. Over the past years, Oromia has experienced mass killings, sustained insecurity, systematic political pressure, and mass detention of tens of thousands of Oromo, including youth and opposition figures. As a result, families have lived under fear and uncertainty. Large numbers of young people have also migrated under pressure, not as a normal search for opportunity, but as an escape from insecurity, shrinking civic space, and collapsing livelihoods. Alongside this, unemployment has expanded. Poverty has deepened, and economic hardship has become widespread across the Oromia region. The scale of these costs has reached a level Oromia has not paid in its modern history, yet this suffering is excluded from the staged development narrative displayed during official tours. This reality is visible not only in the hardship Oromia is enduring today, but also in how the Oromo people responded when the country was pushed into war from 2020 to 2022. During the 2020 to 2022 Tigray War, the Oromo people, along with Oromo political elites and civic voices, resisted the war and the injustice. They called for de-escalation, humanitarian access, and political settlement. That same lens continues today, as the Oromo people continue to resist the government's approach and speak against the ongoing conflict and injustice in the Amhara region. In this context, asking the Oromo people to become the human base for another Northern war is not only politically manipulative, it also ignores what the Oromo people have already endured under the same government. The armed conflict with the Oromo Liberation Army has continued for years, and the regime's response has further militarized everyday life in many areas. This reality makes it impossible to credibly present the Oromo people as naturally aligned with the state's external war agenda. People living through prolonged internal conflict, repression, and economic hardship cannot be treated as a unified instrument for escalation elsewhere. The war being prepared is not an Oromo war. Oromo identity should not be used as the justification or the fuel for escalation. The Oromo people have already shown that they demand justice, and that lasting security comes from political settlement and accountable governance. This is exactly why the staged image of Wollega matters, because it seeks to hide conflict under ceremony. Yet the Wollega that was presented as peaceful, secure, and enthusiastically supportive sits uneasily with the region's lived conditions after years of conflict. A zone endowed with fertile agricultural land now faces acute food insecurity because farming has been repeatedly disrupted. Malaria, once declared eradicated, has returned and is spreading again. Trade routes have thinned as businesses withdraw under insecurity, and the road toward Asosa, once economically active, has become increasingly hollow. For many residents, including those in the diaspora or living in major cities, ordinary life events such as mourning, weddings, or family visits have been blocked for years by fear and instability. Beyond the stage sites of official appearance, state authority remains fragile and contested. Wollega, like Tigray, has occupied a central place in Abiy's security and political imagination since he came to power, and this has been expressed openly in his earlier public posture. What appears to be shifting now is not the underlying orientation, but the urgency to mobilize. The messaging seeks to draw Oromo constituencies into a posture of loyalty and sacrifice in anticipation of a new confrontation, even as the costs of the previous years remain visible in the social and economic exhaustion of the region. His sudden calls for reconciliation among Oromo political actors therefore ring hollow. This rhetorical shift follows months of unsuccessful efforts to co-opt prominent opposition leaders and to fragment dissent through selective engagement. After years of exposure to this political method, many within the Oromo opposition are unlikely to be persuaded by last-minute appeals that are not matched by credible political guarantees. They have consistently argued that Ethiopia's crisis cannot be resolved through unilateral bargaining, closed-door arrangements, or short-lived tactical alliances. A stronger conclusion is now necessary because the risks are not only rhetorical. To officials and political actors, especially those from the Oromia region who amplify the message that the Oromo people must rally behind a northern war, the responsibility is clear. Stop treating Oromo identity as a weapon of state policy. Stop presenting Oromo lives as expendable proof of loyalty. Oromo people have already paid an extraordinary cost under this regime in blood, imprisonment, fear, displacement, and economic collapse. They should not be asked to finance another war with their sons and daughters, especially a war sold through slogans that hide political interests behind ethnic language. To Oromo political elites, civic voices, and community leaders, the task is to refuse collective implication, neutralize the narrative at its source by insisting on a simple distinction. Oromo identity is not Abiy's war mandate. Oromo interests are not protected by marching north. Oromo dignity is defended through justice, political settlement, and accountable governance, not through mobilization for new rounds of destruction. To elites in the north, the message must also be direct. Do not accept the regime's frame that equates the Oromo people with the state's agenda. Recognize the hardship Oromo people are living through and separate them from the narrative that tries to portray them as a unified war bloc. If northern elites allow this framing to take root, they will be helping Abiy convert a political crisis into an ethnic confrontation. The only responsible response is to neutralize the frame from both sides, refuse collective blame, and demand an inclusive political settlement that prevents another war from being manufactured. Through staged unity and controlled fear, the only responsible path now is to reject this manufactured war mandate and force a negotiated political settlement before Ethiopia is pushed into another round of war, a crisis that would not stop at Ethiopia's borders but could spread instability across the Horn of Africa. Wrapping up, Ethiopia stands at a critical crossroads. The question is not only whether another war is coming, but how narratives are being constructed to justify it, and who is being positioned to carry its cost. If Oromo identity is framed as a war mandate, the consequences will not remain political. They will become generational. The responsibility now lies with political elites across Oromia and the North to reject collective blame, resist manufactured unity under fear, and insist on an inclusive political settlement. This is Digital Oromia, where we analyze power, sovereignty, and identity beyond the surface. Subscribe, share, and continue the conversation.